Welcome, Madhur-Nain.
Hi, it's so wonderful to be here.
I'm very excited. I loved the book. I love it for multiple reasons, which we'll talk about, but I really enjoyed reading it, and I am not completely through, not completely. I'm just starting some of your meditations at the back of the book.
Oh,
So,
great.
but I've read the rest. I can't wait to get into this discussion. But before we start talking about meditation, I think I want to start with more the psychology side
Mhm.
because most of our audience has heard some of that before, and I want them to understand how it ties into the meditations that you're going to talk about. So, one of the things I'd like to talk about, especially under the current conditions, is I'm wondering if you could describe what happens when we hold stress in our body.
Yes. So, what happens when we hold stress in our body is our body does not know the difference between being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, running for our lives, living in a war zone, and worrying about what our kids are doing or not doing because they're not in school, worrying where our spouse is, worrying about our bills, worrying about things. Our organs and our glands don't know the difference. And so when we have, we all have this most amazing, powerful organ called the brain. It's like science doesn't even fully understand what the brain can actually do. And so that's why I like to say this, we're working on having a stressless brain, but we have to harness the mind. The mind is the part that we deal with. And we're not thinking, oh, my brain is stressed. We're often like, it's our thoughts, it's our feelings, all of those things. So when we start ruminating, analyzing, processing, thinking about our everyday life, good, bad, right, wrong, stop, go, all of that, our amygdala, it gets triggered when anything triggers fight, flight, or freeze. And when that happens, our organs and our glands respond that way. It doesn't know the difference. And so it's really important that we understand that meditation is not about shutting off our mind, shutting off our brain, because we would die, literally. So it's really about harnessing, training, and teaching our mind to serve our higher consciousness, our intuition, our meditative mind, whichever sounds right for you in your language. And that's why we need to work with the mind.
Beautiful. That really leads into the sort of part two of this, which is how do our thoughts affect our stress levels?
Yes. So what happens is that most of us believe everything we think. There's a great quote by the Dalai Lama: don't believe everything you think. And I do this as, it's interesting in as I'm talking about my book, and I've worked with clients for over 20 years, I'm really learning that the thing with our thoughts is that our thoughts are governed and created out of our past experiences. Our past experiences create lenses. And depending on if we're tired, moody, not feeling well, worried, didn't sleep that night, all these things can affect our ability to be able to be present, centered, and aware. And with COVID on top of that, that just adds another whole lens. So when any of those things are off, these lenses come in, and then our mind looks and interprets our life, our experiences, other people, other events, our events through that lens. And the yogis believe that our mind's purpose is to analyze. The mind thinks in polarities. And so if we're not aware that our mind's just creating thoughts to make sense of things, then we often will believe what I'm thinking is real, what I'm thinking is true. And as I say in my book, I don't say 100% because I always have a client who loves to challenge me, but I say 98, 99% of the time, anything you think is made up and may or may not be true. So,
I agree with that. And
yeah.
I agree with what you just said. I do the same thing. I say 99.8% because
Yeah.
someone's always going to
Oh,
point it out.
always.
Yeah. Um, so so keeping that in mind and beginning to understand, because we're going to move into the meditation, is that many people, in mindfulness, we refer to mindless, which is where we're not recognizing that those thoughts are not who we are. They're usually not true. A lot of them are negative. um, it, Something that you said in the book really resonated with me or caught my attention because it was regarding how we create our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely believe that we can create or co-create our realities. But I tend to focus, I didn't even realize till I read your book, I tend to always focus on the positive side of that. And you mentioned how that's not always such a healthy thing. And so I was wondering if you could expound on that a little bit.
Yes. So the yogis believe that we have three minds. We have three lenses that we look through in our mind. We have the negative mind, as you were saying, a lot of us tend to go to the negative mind. And the negative mind is not bad either. The negative mind actually is the protective mind. But the issue would be is if that, again, if you think of it as a lens, if that lens is really thick, then that skews our awareness and ability to know what is real danger and what's just my reaction. So if our negative mind, if our protective mind is super overactive, an extreme version would be someone who won't leave their home. I'm so afraid. So they stay home all the time. They don't leave. They order their, now with COVID, you can order everything. You don't have to. But that extreme mind lens skews it. The positive mind, that lens, is our perception. So the best way I explain the positive and overactive positive mind is commercial. Like imagine this is like, here's a new bottle of medicine. This is to help with your headaches. You will never have a headache again, but you will have chronic diarrhea. You can't sleep at night and you're going to have a dry mouth. But this medicine is going to make your headache go away. You must have it. That's an overactive positive mind. It's looking at all the possibilities and the perspectives in the positive lens. So someone who has an overactive positive mind might be constantly getting themselves into the wrong relationships, into opportunities where they're always, losing money or having fallouts of friends. Like, God, why is this always happening? Because you're saying yes too much. You're just always like, okay, great, easy going. I can do this. Look at this perspective. And if it's too much, you don't have enough of the negative mind, which is the protective mind, then you're you can trip again, fall.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's really important because of course, life is not all positive to begin with, but I do believe it's a balance and we can't avoid the negative. And I think that is
Right.
maybe sometimes what people do is they're trying to completely avoid the negative. And I agree with you. The negative is extremely important. We just don't want to be too far one way or the other.
Right. And the third mind is the neutral mind. And the neutral mind is where we ultimately want to make, especially big decisions through. So what happens is the mind is so quick. I mean, our thought crosses you know your horizon in your mind, and you're instantly in your emotion, and sometimes people can't even tell you what they were thinking before they tell you how they're feeling, because it's so quick. So part of meditation is to start to learn, what are my thoughts, and learning that my thoughts are creating my reality. So that negative mind, positive mind, that dance, and that happens in a nanosecond. But if it's off, it's really hard to get to the neutral mind, and being unattached, living, like the Buddhists talk about open hands, being unattached to the outcome.
Yeah, boy, it's a lot to think about. But I think it's so important. I really do. So I appreciate you sharing that. Um, Another thing that you touched on in the book that I thought might really be something important for our listeners to understand better is the difference between happiness and contentment.
So, most of us in the West are always looking to be happy. But when we're always in happiness, it almost looks like manic. And we can't always be happy, because happy is this like increased high level of, like happy and excitement and a good mood, and everything's going your way and you're easy with the flow. We can't operate there all the time. On one level, remember, if we come back to the body, we're having to secrete certain, hormones through our glands. We're having to have a super clear mind. And contentment is that space between happiness and if you opposite would be sadness, if you will. And contentment is that middle line. Like I've had clients come in before and they're just like, you know, I'm feeling fine, nothing's bad's happening, but I'm not super happy. And then we talk about, well, what's wrong with vanilla ice cream? Like, what's wrong with just being content that you're just in a pause? Because it's a time for our body to relax, our mind to relax. It's imagining if we're always happy, we wouldn't be able to sleep because our mind would be going, going, going. And it's one study I read, if you miss sleep, like a good sleep in one night, it lowers your immune system by 40%.
Wow.
One night. So if you think about happiness and manic happiness, if we're there all the time, our body, our mind is not having just that contentment. And I also, it's unachievable to always be happy. We'll crash.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a correlation between that and what you were just discussing with the three minds and that neutral
Yes.
space, right?
Yeah.
So I have one more question before we move into Kundalini, and that is, and again, just relates personally to me. During when the pandemic started and the shutdowns, and of course, because of our line of work, it greatly impacted us and what we had to
Hmm.
do. My
Yeah.
rituals went out the window, in all honesty. For about 6 months, every ritual I had, every habit I had, every pattern I had was gone. And so just recently, things are finally, I guess this is the calm before the next storm, but things are finally calming down again. And it's one of my top priorities to establish new rituals now because
Hmm.
it's different. We're not living in the same world. But you talk about this in the book, and I was wondering if you could share why rituals are so important.
Rituals are important because they help us for two things. They help us create habits, and they also help repetitiveness. So, we have rituals in our lives anyway, brushing our teeth, getting our cup of coffee in the morning, having our glass of wine at the end of the day, and some are healthy and some are unhealthy. So rituals are important because it's building blocks, and it also allows our body and mind know when we're transitioning from one to the other. So I've had clients before where I've worked on creating a ritual when they come home from work, especially, these two scenarios. It was men coming home from work and transitioning into family life. And what they brought to therapy was, there'd be, he would be agitated, the kids wanted all this, the wife, it's like he walked in the door and it was instant, like blah, 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 and he was just and he would snap and they would have a fight and so forth. And so we talked about creating a ritual where he comes home, he greets his wife, and he'd go into his room for 30 minutes. And he would be able, change his clothes. Maybe one client wanted to sit and read for 20 minutes. Another client wanted to take a shower and put on, clean clothes. Another client wanted to, go exercise. And then they were able to really transition and be the husband, the father, family person. So that is a kind of a ritual. And our mind, the reason why they're important is because our mind, we have these neurological pathways in our brain, and when we create rituals, then our mind goes into that neurological pathway and we create these healthy habits to be able to behave in the way we want, to think the way we want. We do the same with negative rituals and negative habits as well. The nice thing is you can change them, but it does take some time.
That's so interesting because probably, I would say over the last 2 weeks, we've been polling people during our workshops about their biggest stressor. And I would say 95% at least, it has been the blur between work and personal life because they're
Yeah,
working from home and there's
right.
no demarcation. And we just started talking about this with people about the importance of it used to be the commute on the way home. That was
Mm-hmm.
the day has ended. I'm driving home now. And in LA, that could be a long time, right? So you have a long
Yes.
time to decompress. And then you get home and you've got your other hat on and you're ready to go. And that doesn't exist anymore, which is creating a problem for people because
Mm-hmm.
they're not stopping the thought patterns about work and they're not
Yeah.
able to just easily transition. And so I just read an article, just I guess it was last week, saying that there are some people now getting in their car at the end of the workday in their driveway and driving around the block. And like
Yeah.
it's that simple, but they just need that little ritual to say, "Oh, I'm off work," which so it's pretty
Yeah.
fascinating. But thank you. That ties right into that.
Well, it's interesting. It's because, a big piece of it is it's the mind. And in the old days, I talk about this in my book a little bit as well, is in the old days when religion wasn't such a dirty word and didn't have as much crises as we've been having in religions, is that people went to church or synagogue or temple 2 to 3 times a week. They would show up. They would be the same rituals every time you walk in. You would often sit in your same pew or same seat. You would do, there's like, certain, you read from the Bible or from the verse. You do it out loud like this. That's meditation. If you read your scriptures out loud as a group, that is meditation. There's tons of research that shows what it does to the brain. You might sing hymns, then you go, but you're taking a moment that you're just shutting your mind off from everyday life and worry. We don't do that anymore because most of us don't go to church, don't go to synagogue, don't, we don't affiliate to any religious, or we're just a name. So, but again, like the driving, often people can say, you hear them talk, I got home, I don't even remember getting home, because they're in their mind the whole time. And so sometimes I encourage people to chant and sing hymns if you're Christian and don't feel comfortable with the Sanskrit, but like chant the whole way home. Because here's the thing, is your mind's so incredible. You're going to be chanting and thinking about multiple things at the same time. But the chanting is this, it's like the cheesecloth to your thoughts. So some things are going to get caught and you can discard it, and some of it's going to go through and it manifests. So
Great. Well, that leads right into my big question, which is what is Kundalini meditation?
So Kundalini means awareness. And so Kundalini meditation is creating the awareness of ourselves. So a big piece of Kundalini meditation is to build, learn, and understand who we are, all the facets, all the parts that make up who we are. What I like about Kundalini meditations for mental health issues specifically, which we all have a level of mental health issues, is that it's not just a silent sitting and being with your breath, which for people with anxiety, that can actually be the worst thing to do. I've had clients come to me and say, I can't meditate, it makes me feel worse. And that's what we call relaxation induced anxiety. So what I like about chanting and different breath patterns is that you're actually giving your mind something to focus on, and it allows us to go deeper and connect to this area of flow. That's there's a scientist who talks about flow, and then in Kundalini we talk about shunya, which is that deep stillness. And that meditation really creates space between our thoughts, and it changes the quality of our thoughts, because our thoughts create how we feel, and how we feel creates how we behave. And if we can change our thinking, we can change how we behave, because our feelings change.
Absolutely. And so I agree with you. We've been exploring different types of meditations, even though, we obviously our main focus is mindfulness meditation because it's a mindfulness podcast.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work for everyone. And in fact, as I mentioned to you, I just had someone have a problem in a retreat because
Yeah.
sitting still like that created a negative reaction. And so, one of the things I appreciate about the book, The Stressless Brain, is that it is a manual. I mean, I see it as a manual. You really lay out the psychological factors and the scientific evidence, but then you also include how to do it, like what it
Yeah.
does, what all the different I don't know what activities, I don't know what you'd call them, but the
Well, it's like,
mudras and the
yeah, the
poses.
mood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you
It
describe
is
what
an
all of those.
activity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's an activity. But I find that very helpful because I do like to understand what's underneath something before I do it, right? So
Hmm.
I do want to share that with our listeners that if you don't know, I didn't know anything about Kundalini meditation until I read your book. And then I also appreciate that you included specific types of meditations to do for different goals. So I think that that's very helpful for someone that's new to this and doesn't really understand it. You mentioned that a person could start a meditation journey in as little as 3 minutes a day, which
Yeah.
I know that will appeal to a lot of people. So I was wondering if you could explain that and what the journey or the path. I'm sure it doesn't stay at 3 minutes, but could you talk a little bit about maybe how they could benefit
Hmm.
even if they start small?
Yeah. So for sure. Um, studies have found that 3 minutes of meditation actually lowers your blood pressure. So something is happening. I've even told clients before, do 1 minute. Do 1 minute for a week, add another minute the next week. And again, it's that rituals, it's bringing a new ritual in. It's different. Sometimes the difference of it, like if you're moving your hands or you're breathing in a different way or you're chanting, you're kind of like, this is too different. But if we start small, it's building blocks. So here's the thing is that, like I said, 3 minutes does create a change in your body. And what I tell people, start with 3 minutes. And then as you find that 3 minutes goes really quickly, you just add another minute on. And you can work your way to 11. The 11 minutes is really the number that I like to give out the most, but that can feel sometimes really, really daunting. And it sounds like silly, it's only 11 minutes, but it does feel overwhelming. Like you're constantly looking at your phone or checking your watch, or, the dog distracts you. And I tell people, that's okay. You just keep coming back. But again, this is kind of a funny analogy, and I tease my clients. Most people poop for longer than 3 minutes or in the bathroom for longer than 3 minutes. So if you can go in the bathroom for 7 minutes and you're usually maybe on your phone, you can sit for 3 minutes and meditate.
That's funny. I do share with my listeners or workshop participants who are really hesitant about meditating. Um, the first time I meditated, I tried 3 minutes, and it was just a sitting, sitting
Mm-hmm.
meditation focused on the breath.
Yeah.
And I am pretty hyper, and so I thought, this was years ago, and I thought, okay, I can do this. I can sit still for however long. And the 3 minutes felt like a half an hour. Like I thought, oh, it has to be beyond the time now. When I looked at my clock, I was like, that was 3 minutes. And so
Yeah.
I do have empathy for people who
Mm-hmm.
are nervous about it, because it does, at first it does feel unnatural in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
especially in today's society. But it's absolutely worth it, any kind of meditation, but it's
Yeah.
absolutely worth it to take the time. And I agree with you, just build up. I
Yeah.
think that's the same thing.
um, you know, when hearing your story, I don't remember the exact pieces of it, but I read this one article of this executive, very successful businessman on the East Coast who was with friends and they bet him, I bet you can't sit 10 minutes still without going on your phone. It was like something ridiculous, like $20,000, and he couldn't do it. And he was so disturbed by that then he ended up going into his own journey of meditation. And now his whole company does meditation. And he really brought, because he was like, this is ridiculous that I can't sit still for 10 minutes. And part of it is, you know, the, like some of the meditations, like there's one that I give for boundaries, like boundaries in your relationship or boundaries at work. I've given this before, before you go to work and if you're feeling like your boundaries are not being respected, or you're kind of sucking energy from your boss or your coworkers or so forth. I give one that's a movement. So your hands come into prayer pose at your heart center and you say Sat, and then your hands come together out and then open and spread to the sides, and that would be Qatar. So the yogis believe that Sat means truth and Qatar means the doer. So if you feel comfortable, you can just be like Sat, Qatar. If you don't feel comfortable, just say truth is the doer. And you would do this motion for 2 or 3 minutes. And what you're, on the sideline, it's called heart center opener. I call it cutting through the bullshit meditation. So because it's about being at your heart center, where we want to be. It's the gateway between earthly experience and soul experience. And we're cutting through our fears, we're cutting through the duality of life, and we're going to have an open heart and have boundaries at the same time. That's what we want to do. Is we don't want to close down, but we don't want to be a doormat. So the nice thing is, like, sometimes you're so busy, like, oh, am I getting the hands right, and what am I saying, and my eyes are closed, and then before you know it, there's 3 minutes, and you just do a little bit, like you sit in your car and just do like a little bit in your car, and then you go to work and you'll find, like, wow, I do feel more protected, I do feel more grounded, I do feel more open.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, something that you just said, I would like you to say a little more about, because I know I run into this even with mindfulness meditation. And so if someone says to you, well, I can't do this because of my religion, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to use Sanskrit words because I'm Catholic. I think one of the
Yeah.
examples you gave was about a Catholic person.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to that person if they were interested in this?
Well, the first thing I say is, the Catholics and the Jewish people and the Muslims and the Hindus, they've all been meditating way before we all came up with mindfulness and Kundalini and everything. So meditation has been a part of religion forever. It's just looked a little bit different. So singing hymns is meditation. Reading the Bible or your scriptures out loud is meditation. And I've heard there's a priest in our town who has a very big congregation, and he tells them, you may not do meditation, it's against our faith. And I just am so heartbroken for them all, because why don't you just teach them Lord's prayer and say it together for 11 minutes? Like, how powerful would that be? So that said, what I do is I encourage them, like this one client, I talk about my book. I spent some time talking with my client about scriptures from his faith, and we found one that felt really grounded to him, really safe and loving and open, and he memorized it, and we incorporated that for his meditation. I am creating a Christian meditation CD that will be in English and in Latin. So here's what I tell people about the Sanskrit and not chanting or singing in our mother tongue. Here's the thing is, if a lot of us, often when we come to meditation, it's because we're feeling disconnected in our life. We're feeling maybe pain, emotional pain, sadness, fear, hurt, anger, feeling stuck. All these things are coming. So sometimes what brings us to meditation is often something is not working, something is hurting. So if we're sitting here, and again, I'm a huge advocate for chanting, but if we're sitting here and we're doing a chant that's saying English, like let's say we could say something like, I'm the glorious, gracious child of God. I'm a joyful, serene, positive, and loving. And that's an affirmation I did in college, like 30 something years ago. I still remember it. But let's say, it's something long like that, or something simple like I am the grace and connected to everything. Our mind some days might be like, Madhur-Nain, you're not really the grace. Who do you think you are? And are you really a part of everything? And why do you always, and it triggers, because it's my mother tongue and I relate to words. It can trigger our mind to really analyze, and it's harder to drop into that flow, into the shunya, because our mind gets triggered. Now, if I'm sitting here chanting Sat Katar, Sat Katar, yes, I can read and see what it means. But if I'm repeating again and again, at some point I let go of that and I just move into the flow, and the words don't trigger my mind, my insecurities, my fears, my analyzing, and we're able to go deeper. And I tell people, meditation, I says in my book, meditation is a washing machine for your brain and for your mind, and chanting a spot remover. So
Perfect.
that's what I tell them.
Great. No, thank you for that because, I try different approaches because I absolutely believe there's no conflict in it. But I want people to feel comfortable. And
Yeah.
this one is Kundalini is not quite as middle of the road, maybe I would say, as mindfulness
No.
meditation, right? So I don't want I have been really encouraging everyone to be curious. Like you don't have to do it forever. If you don't like it, don't do it again, but give it a try. So I'm just trying to remove those barriers so that people will give it a try.
I tell people, try something, anything we should try 3 times, because the first time we're kind of skeptical. The second time we're maybe a little curious. And the third time we actually are experiencing it. And after 3 times, if it's not for you, no problems. Go find something else. But that's also one of the tricks. Don't just stop and do nothing. Go and find something else.
Perfect. Perfect. No, and I like that the three times because I agree with you. I know the first time I've tried anything, I'm distracted with the process. I'm not
Yeah.
really experiencing it. So that's great. So I guess I would maybe we could close on if someone was I know you have a lot of different meditations, and I'm sure there are a ton more in Kundalini yoga and meditation. But I guess I would ask for your expert advice on if someone was brand new to meditation in
Mhm.
general, brand new, and they decide they want to experiment with this one to see how it feels. What steps do you suggest they would take? They can't just jump in and do 25 meditations, right? So is there a best way to kind of get started or to ease into it or to I think you say ease in or jump in, but could
Yeah.
you share that a little bit?
Yeah. So often I tell people just to do the beginner's meditation, which is a silent one. and you're breathing with the chant Sat Nam. Sat means truth and Nam means identity. And so you'll hear my voice. My CD comes, excuse me, my book comes with 37 free digital downloads. So you'll have all the music. So the first one, the beginner's meditation, is just you're sitting comfortably, eyes are closed. You can lay down, you can sit on your couch, and you would just inhale when you hear the chant Sat. You'd hold your breath, and then you would exhale as you hear the word Nam, and then suspend your breath out. So that's a really easy beginner's one. I also find that when clients or people are feeling really desperate in their lives, like they're really kind of tired of hurting, they've reached their bottom, I say you jump in right in with a chanting one. And you can start with literally just doing it silent to start. And I talk about this in my book. You would listen to the chant. You would maybe use one called Gunpati, which is great for PTSD and trauma and healing the past. It also helps to make the impossible possible because it helps us to get out of our box thinking. And there's a lot of things. You're moving your fingers, your eye focus, you're chanting. It's really a big chant. It's Sata Nama Rama Da Sa Sa Se So Hung. It's really, but once you get it, it's really easy. But you would start with doing the fingers and listening. And then slowly you might mouth along, maybe then you'll whisper along, and then you'll chant. It's okay to go slowly. But I find that I have some people who've never done meditation and it's really foreign, but they're so tired of being miserable and they will just jump in. And then I have clients who, who come in, they're like, I'm just not quite sure. And then I give them the beginner's one or any of the segmented breath ones because it stimulates the vagus nerve.
Excellent. Well, I think during these challenging times, and as we're now entering another, looks like to be another transition, it's more important than ever to have tools, to have techniques that really serve us much better than some of the alternatives we choose when we're
Yeah.
feeling stressed or anxious or at the bottom, whatever the case may be.
You
And
know,
oh, go ahead.
as I say, the alternative behaviors for our stress and anxiety leaves us with a hangover of some degree. If it's sugar or shopping or drinking or drugs, meditation doesn't leave you with a hangover.
No,
So
absolutely. A nice feeling, but not a
yeah,
hangover.
but not a
Um,
hangover.
yeah, and I do think it's also important that, and I want to reiterate to our audience, regardless of the type of meditation you practice, the key is practicing
Mm-hmm.
and creating a habit to do it. I really believe it daily is
I
important, even if it's a
agree.
short amount of time, and that the list of health benefits, whether it's mental, emotional, or physical, is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And Kundalini yoga, just like the other types of yoga we've covered, has been studied. We know it works. We know it just takes the effort to actually do it, right?
Yes. Yes, 100%. I tell people all the time, every day, because and I encourage people to do it first thing in the morning because imagine it helps you to get into the channel that you want to operate for the day. And even if it's 3 minutes, you get up, you go to the bathroom, maybe right away you sit down and you get a cup of coffee, you turn it on. For the time it's brewing, go if it's 3.5 or 4 minutes or even 2.5 minutes, if you do that, just think of it. I'm tapping into the frequency that I want to operate in my life. If it's with my children, with my spouse, with myself, with coworkers, with my neighbors, it's that frequency.
Yeah, and it's so funny. I discovered the effectiveness of yoga of meditation in the morning. Well, yoga too, but
Yeah.
meditation in the morning uh, really because I first tried to do it at night and I fell asleep every single time. So I wasn't really experiencing the meditation. I was using it. I mean, I wasn't doing it purposely, but it was putting me to
Yeah.
sleep. And so uh, that moved me to the morning. And then I discovered the same thing. It changes the entire way my day goes every
Yeah.
single day. So
Hmm.
I agree with that too. Well, I just want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your wisdom. And I want to make sure people know that you do have a lot of resources on your website. So we'll put up your website I'll say it in the podcast, but
Yeah.
we'll also put it up on social
Okay.
media. And of course, the book is
That's okay.
Stressless Brain. And again, I really enjoyed the book and the combination of the psychology and the science behind it, as well as the step by step explanation for what the activities mean and how to do them. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really had a fun time speaking with you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.